The transport shuttle docked at Harmony Prime with a gentle hum, and Cole stepped onto the orbital station for the first time in her life. She was 17 years old, with brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail and eyes that had seen more wilderness than most adults twice her age. She carried a single bag over her shoulder and wore the standard uniform of the Galactic Youth Academy. Nothing about her appearance suggested anything unusual. She looked like any ordinary human girl from any ordinary Earth city. But there was nothing ordinary about her presence here. The orientation hall stretched before her, a massive dome of transparent crystal that revealed the endless stars beyond. Hundreds of students filled the space, representing over 40 different species from across the known galaxy. Some had scales that shimmered under the artificial lights. Others floated on cushions of generated anti-gravity, their bodies too delicate for standard movement. A few were made of what appeared to be living crystal, their forms refracting light into rainbow patterns on the polished floor. Every single one of them turned to look at when she entered. The conversation stopped, the movement stopped. For 3 heartbeats, the entire hall became utterly silent. Had expected this. She had prepared herself for weeks, reading every report and cultural briefing the Earth government had provided. She knew what she represented to these beings. She knew what her planet meant to them. Earth was classified as a Category 9. In galactic terms, this was nearly the most dangerous classification a planet could receive. Earth had crushing gravity compared to most inhabited worlds. Its atmosphere was thick with oxygen, a highly reactive gas that most species found toxic. The planet experienced extreme temperature variations, violent weather patterns, and seismic activity that would render most worlds uninhabitable. Its biosphere was filled with organisms designed to kill, from microscopic bacteria to apex predators weighing several tons. And humans had not just survived there. They had thrived. They had built civilizations, developed technology, and eventually reached the stars. To the students watching her now was not just a new classmate. She was a living example of something that should not exist. She was proof that intelligent life could emerge from conditions they considered impossible. An administrator approached her, moving with the careful steps of someone who would rather be anywhere else. His name was Counselor, and his pale blue skin had taken on a slightly tint that recognized from her cultural studies as a sign of extreme nervousness. His antennae trembled with each step. "Miss Cole," he said, his translator rendering his words in flat English. "Welcome to the Galactic Youth Academy. I will be directing you to your assigned guide." "Thank you," said simply. She noticed how he flinched slightly at the sound of her voice. Human vocal cords produced sounds in a frequency range that many species found unsettling. She had practiced speaking softly, keeping her tone as gentle as possible. Her assigned guide was a younger named, who waited near the far wall of the orientation hall. When approached, he immediately moved backward, maintaining a distance of exactly 3 meters between them. He said. "I will show you to your quarters and explain the academy schedule." "Nice to meet you." He did not respond to this. Instead, he turned and began walking, checking over his shoulder every few steps to ensure she was following, but also to ensure she was not getting too close. The corridors of Harmony Prime were designed for beings of many different sizes and movement types. The floors had sections of standard walking surface, liquid channels for aquatic species, and magnetic strips for those who moved on metallic appendages. Stayed on the standard surface, her footsteps echoing in halls that seemed to empty as she passed through them. Students pressed themselves against walls when they saw her coming. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Instructors paused in doorways, checking their data tablets as if suddenly remembering urgent business elsewhere. "Your room is in the human-compatible section," explained, still not looking directly at her. "Atmospheric composition has been adjusted to match Earth standard. Gravity is set to 0.9 of your normal. The Academy apologizes that full Earth gravity cannot be provided, but the structural requirements were beyond current station capabilities. Point 9 is fine, said. I appreciate the effort. Her quarters were small but comfortable. A bed sized for human proportions, a desk with a terminal, a small window looking out at the stars. Everything was clean and functional. Everything was also clearly designed to contain her as much as house her. The walls were thicker than necessary. The door had multiple locking mechanisms. The ventilation system had filters that she suspected were not standard issue. They were afraid of her. Not because of anything she had done, not because of any threat she had made, simply because of where she came from, simply because her species had evolved on a world that killed everything that was not strong enough to fight back. Unpacked her bag slowly. She had brought very little, some clothes, a few books that were not available in digital format at the Academy, a photograph of her family standing in front of their home in Colorado, mountains rising behind them, her younger brother making a face at the camera. She missed them already. The first meal in the communal dining hall was an experience she would not soon forget. The hall was designed to accommodate every species at the Academy, with different sections providing different atmospheric conditions separated by thin force fields. The human section had exactly one table. It was designed for 12 occupants. Sat alone. The food synthesizer had attempted to produce something compatible with human biology. What it delivered was a block of compressed protein with the texture of wet cardboard and the taste of absolutely nothing. Ate it without complaint. She had eaten worse during survival training back home. She was halfway through her meal when shadows fell across her table. A group of students stood before her. They were tall beings, nearly 2 meters in height, with hard shells covering their bodies and bioluminescent patterns that pulsed across their surfaces in colors she did not have names for. Their leader was a male named, and his translator rendered his clicking mandibles into words dripping with contempt. He said, I demanded to know why the Academy would allow something like you near civilized species. The administrators gave me no satisfactory answer. Set down her protein block. I'm here to learn, she said calmly, same as everyone else. You are not the same as everyone else. You are from a world that produces monsters. Your species evolved hunting in packs. You have forward-facing eyes, binocular vision. You are built to kill. Several other students in the hall had stopped eating to watch, could feel their attention like a weight on her shoulders. I'm built to survive, she said quietly. There's a difference. Bioluminescent patterns flared with colors she recognized from her studies as amusement and derision. We shall see. We shall see how long you survive here. He turned and walked away, his followers trailing behind him. Returned to her meal. The protein block had not improved during the interruption. She finished it anyway, then returned to her empty quarters to study for classes that would begin the next day. Outside her window, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere among them, invisible from this distance, was a small yellow sun orbiting a blue and green world where everything wanted to kill you. She was a long way from home. The weeks that followed taught a great deal about patience. Her study materials disappeared 3 times in the first 10 days. She would leave her tablet in her room, secured in a drawer that was supposed to be locked to her biometrics alone, and return to find it gone. The first time she reported the theft to counselor. He had nodded sympathetically, promised to investigate, and done nothing. The second time she did not bother reporting it. By the third time she had memorized every lesson, every reading assignment, and every supplementary document. She no longer needed the tablet at all. Her dormitory door was locked from outside on 6 separate occasions. The first time, she missed her morning classes and received a formal warning about attendance. After that, she learned to check the door mechanism each night before sleeping. She learned to carry tools that could bypass the lock if necessary. She learned to wake at the slightest unusual sound. someone her translation device to emit frequencies that caused stabbing pain behind her eyes. She disabled the device, learned to interpret the most common alien languages through gesture and context alone, and rebuilt the translator herself using spare parts she found in a maintenance corridor. She reported none of this. She adapted to all of it. Her instructors began to notice her. In xenobiology class, she provided insights about Earth predators that shocked a professor who had studied fauna for 60 years. In gravitational physics, she calculated orbital mechanics with a speed and accuracy that made her classmates stare. In comparative linguistics, she drew connections between alien language structures and ancient human tongues that opened entirely new avenues of research. The Academy had accepted her expecting her to fail. They had prepared for her to struggle with the advanced curriculum, to fall behind students from civilizations that had been spacefaring for before humans discovered fire. Instead, she excelled. This did not make her popular, and his group watched her from across lecture halls, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with colors she had learned to associate with resentment and calculation. Other students avoided her more deliberately now, as if her academic success made her more dangerous rather than less. Even instructors who praised her work maintained careful distance, never standing closer than 2 meters during conversations. Was the only one who showed her anything approaching kindness. The young had been assigned as her guide, and he seemed to take this duty seriously even though it clearly terrified him. He waited outside her classes to walk with her to the next one. He ensured her food synthesizer was programmed correctly. He answered her questions about academy customs and traditions with nervous sincerity. "Why do you help me?" asked him one afternoon as they walked through a garden dome filled with plants from 100 different worlds. "Everyone else is afraid of me, but you keep coming back." Antennae twitched in what she had learned was a sign of embarrassment. "My grandmother told me stories when I was young, stories about an explorer who encountered humans during the first contact period. She said the human was frightening at first, tall and strange and moving in ways that seemed predatory. But the human shared food with the explorer, helped repair his damaged ship, spent weeks teaching him about Earth music and Earth poetry." What happened to the explorer? "He returned home and spent the rest of his life arguing that humans should be welcomed into galactic society. Most people thought he was mad, but my grandmother believed him. She said that sometimes the most frightening things in the universe turn out to be the most worth knowing." Smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had allowed herself since arriving at the academy. "Your grandmother sounds wise." "She was. She died before the academy accepted your application. I think she would have wanted to meet you." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, surrounded by flowers that glowed with internal light and trees that hummed with frequencies just below human hearing. Then spoke again. "Is planning something. I do not know what, but I have seen him watching you with colors I do not like. Please be careful." Nodded. She had noticed the same thing. She had been noticing it for days. The confrontation came in the 3 days after warning. There was a massive enclosed space designed to simulate various planetary environments for practical biology lessons. Today's environment was a temperate forest, with actual trees grown from seeds collected across a dozen worlds and a small stream running through artificial rocks. Had come here to study, finding the space peaceful in a way that the sterile corridors of the station were not. And 4 of his followers emerged from behind a cluster of purple-leaf trees. They spread out in a semicircle, cutting off her escape routes with practiced precision. Their bioluminescent patterns pulsed with aggressive reds and threatening oranges. "No instructors here," said. "No cameras that function properly in this section. No witnesses except those loyal to me." Closed her study tablet and stood slowly. Her posture shifted in ways so subtle that most observers would not have noticed. Her weight settled lower. Her shoulders relaxed while somehow becoming more stable. Her eyes, those predatory forward-facing eyes that so disturbed other species, fixed on with an intensity that made him hesitate for just a moment. "Perhaps a lesson is needed," continued, recovering his confidence, "to show her place among civilized beings." "I'm going to explain something to you," said. Her voice was quiet, calm. "I'm only going to explain it once. You threaten me here, surrounded by my companions." "I'm not threatening anyone, I'm providing information." She took a single step forward, took 2 steps back before he realized he was retreating. His followers shifted uneasily. "On my world," said, "everything wants to kill you. The bacteria in the soil can consume you from the inside. The insects carry diseases that have wiped out millions. The weather can freeze you or burn you or drown you or blow you away. The plants produce toxins. The animals hunt in packs or strike from ambush or simply crush you under their weight. The water hides predators. The air itself can kill you if the composition shifts." She took another step. The semicircle of broke, individuals moving away from her as if pulled by invisible forces. "Humans did not survive by being the strongest creatures on Earth. We were not. We did not survive by being the fastest. We were not. We did not survive by having the sharpest claws or the thickest hide or the deadliest venom. We had none of these things." Her voice dropped even lower. Every being in there was frozen now, unable to look away. "We survived by being the most stubborn things on a planet that never stopped trying to kill us. We survived by refusing to die. We survived by looking at everything the universe threw at us and saying no. Not today. Not ever." She stood directly in front of Now. He towered over her by nearly half a meter, his shell thick enough to stop most physical attacks, his mandibles capable of crushing stone, and he was trembling. "I have never hurt anyone at this academy. I have never raised my hand against another student. I have never even raised my voice. I do not intend to start." She leaned closer. Her words were barely above a whisper. "But if you force me to defend myself, you will learn exactly why my species made it off when 99% of everything else died trying. You will learn what 10,000 years of survival against impossible odds has built into human bones and human blood and human will. And you will regret that lesson for the rest of your life." She turned and walked away. Her footsteps were unhurried. Her posture was relaxed. Behind her, 5 stood frozen in place, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with colors that had no name in any language but meant the same thing across every species in the galaxy. Fear. Pure and absolute fear. The annual survival challenge was considered the highlight of the academy year. Every student looked forward to it. Every instructor spoke of it with pride. It was designed to test everything the students had learned, combining physical endurance with mental problem-solving in a controlled environment that simulated real planetary conditions. The exercise took place on a small moon called 3, which orbited a gas giant in a nearby system. The moon had been terraformed centuries ago specifically for training purposes. Its environment could be adjusted through orbital control stations, creating weather patterns and terrain challenges that push students to their limits while remaining fundamentally safe. Safe was the key word. The moon was supposed to be safe. Arrived with her assigned team on the 3rd transport shuttle. Her group consisted of 8 students from 6 different species. Was among them, his antennae already twitching with nervous anticipation. 2 of his followers were also present, a male named and a female named. They had not spoken to since the confrontation in the. They did not speak to her now. The other team members were a female named, a crystalline being called Prism who communicated through light pulses, and 2 amphibious who preferred to be addressed as a single entity called Flowing Current. "The objective is simple," their supervisor announced before departure. "Navigate from your landing zone to the central beacon, 18 kilometers distant. You will face environmental challenges appropriate to your combined species capabilities. Communication with the orbital station will be limited to emergency channels only. You have 48 hours to complete the exercise. The landing was smooth. The first hour was uneventful. The terrain was rocky but manageable, with occasional streams to cross and ridges to climb. Found it almost pleasant compared to the wilderness training she had on Earth. Then the sky turned green. It happened without warning. One moment, the clouds above them were white and normal. The next, they had taken on a sickly emerald color that had never seen in any atmosphere. The wind, which had been gentle, suddenly gusted with enough force to knock off his feet. "What is happening?" demanded, her shell patterns flashing with alarm. Was already checking her equipment. The atmospheric sensors were giving readings that made no sense. Toxicity levels were rising. Pressure was fluctuating wildly. Temperature was dropping at a rate that would bring lethal cold within hours. "Something is wrong with the control systems," she said. "This is not part of the exercise." She tried the emergency communication channel. Static. She tried again. Nothing but interference. Across the moon's surface, similar scenes were playing out with every team. The carefully controlled environment was collapsing into chaos. Weather systems that should have been impossible were forming. Terrain that had been stable for centuries was shifting. In the orbital control station, technicians scrambled to understand what had happened. A cascade failure in the primary systems had spread to the backups. Nothing was responding. The moon's environment was now running on its own, following patterns that no one had programmed and no one could predict. Did not know any of this. She only knew that her team was in danger and that no help was coming. "We need to move," she said, "now." "Move where?" demanded. "We cannot reach the beacon in these conditions." "We're not going to the beacon. We're going to shelter," pointed south toward a ridge of dark rock barely visible through the worsening weather. "There. That geological formation should have caves or overhangs. We need protection from the storm." "How can you know there are caves? Our instruments are not functioning." "I don't need instruments," was already moving, her body angled against the wind. "I grew up reading terrain. That rock type erodes unevenly. It will have natural shelters. Follow me." They followed. Perhaps it was the confidence in her voice. Perhaps it was the simple absence of any better option. Perhaps it was something deeper, some instinct that recognized a leader even when that leader came from a world they feared. The storm worsened with every step. Rain began falling, but it was not water. It was something acidic, something that hissed when it touched exposed surfaces. Pulled her outer jacket off and draped it over, whose skin was already showing chemical burns. "I cannot accept this," protested weakly. "You need protection too." "Human skin is tougher than it looks. Keep moving." They reached the ridge as the full force of the storm hit. Found a cave entrance exactly where she had predicted, a dark opening in the rock face that led to a chamber large enough to hold them all. She ushered everyone inside, counting heads as they passed. "Where is flowing current?" she asked. "They fell behind," said, her voice trembling. "The wind took them. They could not keep up." Did not hesitate. She turned and plunged back into the storm. Visibility was nearly zero. The wind screamed loud enough to drown out thought. The acidic rain burned wherever it touched her exposed arms and face. She ignored all of it, moving by instinct and memory, retracing the path they had taken. She found the huddled behind a rock, their amphibious bodies already showing signs of dehydration as the toxic air stripped moisture from their skin. They were too weak to move on their own. Lifted them, both of them, one under each arm. They were not small beings, but she carried them as if they weighed nothing, her legs churning through mud and stone, her lungs burning with each breath of contaminated air. She reached the cave and deposited them gently on the floor. Immediately began treating their injuries with the limited medical supplies they carried. "You went back," said. There was something new in his voice, not fear, not contempt, something that might have been the beginning of respect. You risked your life for beings who are not even your species." "They're my team," said simply. She was breathing hard. Burns marked her arms and face, but she was already moving to the cave entrance, studying the storm outside with calculating eyes. "We may be here for a while. I'm going to see if I can find anything useful nearby. Stay inside, stay warm, stay quiet." Waite said, "Your injuries, you need treatment." Glanced down at her arms at the chemical burns that would have sent most beings into shock. She shrugged. "They'll heal. Focus on flowing current. Their needs are more urgent than mine." She stood at the cave entrance for hours, watching the storm, analyzing its patterns, planning for what would come next. The others huddled deeper in the cave, sharing body heat where compatible, speaking in whispers when they spoke at all. None of them had ever experienced anything like this. Their worlds were safe. Their environments were controlled. Danger was an abstract concept discussed in classrooms and simulated in carefully managed exercises. For this was familiar. This was what she had trained for her entire life. Not this specific situation, but this type of situation. Chaos, danger, the need to survive when survival seemed impossible. She was not afraid. She was focused. She was calculating. She was doing what her species had always done when faced with conditions that should have killed them. She was refusing to give up. When the storm finally began to weaken, she turned to face her team. Her expression was calm. Her voice was steady. "The weather is breaking," she said. "When it clears enough to move, we're going out there." Out there, shell patterns flickered with confusion. To reach the beacon. No, to find the other teams. Eyes were hard. The rescue systems have failed. If anyone is going to help the other students on this moon, it's going to be us. The cave fell silent. Every being present stared at the human girl who stood framed against the storm, battered and burned but unbroken, ready to walk back into danger not to save herself but to save others. None of them argued. None of them questioned. When she moved, they followed. They had seen what it could do when pushed to the edge. Now they would see what it chose to do when given a choice. The storm had weakened but not ended. Toxic clouds still rolled across the sky in waves, and the wind carried particles that stung any exposed skin. Most beings would have stayed in shelter and waited for rescue that might never come. Led her team into the chaos without hesitation. "We move in formation," she said as they left the cave. "I take point, and you have the strongest shells, so you protect the flanks, and stay in the center. Prism, I need you watching our rear and using your light pulses to signal if you see anything. Flowing current, how are you feeling?" They rippled in a gesture that meant they were weak but functional. "We can move. We will not slow the group." "Good. If anyone starts struggling, you speak up immediately. No heroes. We survive together or not at all." They moved south first, following terrain features that read like a book. She navigated by the position of the gas giant overhead, by the growth patterns of hardy lichen on the rocks, by the way water flowed through natural channels in the stone. Her team watched in amazement as she found paths through seemingly impassable terrain, always moving toward lower ground where other teams might have sought shelter. They found the first group after 2 hours of travel. 7 students from 3 different species were huddled beneath an outcropping of rock, their emergency beacon sending a signal that no one in orbit could receive. Their supplies were exhausted. 2 of them had injuries that needed immediate attention. Their leader, a senior named, stared at as if she were a hallucination. "How did you find us?" he asked. "Our communications are dead. We sent no signal that could penetrate the interference." "I didn't follow a signal," said. She was already moving among the injured, checking wounds, distributing supplies from her team's reserves. "I followed the terrain. This was the most logical place to seek shelter if you were caught in the open when the storm hit. I would have come here." "You would have known to come here, in a storm, on a moon you have never visited before." Shrugged, terrain is terrain. Rock erodes the same way everywhere. Water flows downhill. Creatures seek shelter from wind. Some things are universal. She organized the combined groups into a single unit, redistributing equipment and assigning roles based on each individual's capabilities. The injured were carried by the strongest. The most observant watched for dangers. Everyone had a purpose. Everyone contributed. "We're going to find more teams," announced. The storm hit suddenly. Other groups will have been caught in the open. Some of them will need help. Looked at her with something approaching wonder. "You want to search for survivors, in these conditions, with no communication and no support. Someone has to, and we're the ones who are able to move." They found the second group scattered across a ravine. The terrain had collapsed during the storm, dropping several students into a crevasse that was now filling with acidic runoff. Assessed the situation in seconds. She tied a rope around her waist, gave the other end to and climbed down into the ravine without waiting for discussion. The first student she reached was a young crystalline being whose light patterns were flickering weakly. Their structure had cracked in the fall, and they were too damaged to climb on their own. Secured them to her back and began climbing, using handholds that seemed impossibly small, her muscles burning with effort that should have been beyond any single person. She made the climb 4 times. Each time she brought someone up. Each time she went back down for the next one. By the 4th climb, her hands were bleeding. The acidic water had eaten through her gloves and begun working on her skin. She did not stop. She did not slow. She climbed until every student was safe on solid ground. "Your hands," said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your hands are destroyed." Looked down at her palms. The skin was raw. The acid burns were severe. On most beings, these injuries would require immediate medical intervention and weeks of recovery. "They'll heal," she said. "Humans heal fast, it's a thing." She wrapped her hands in strips torn from her own clothing and kept moving. The third group they found included. The leader was barely conscious when they reached him. His shell had cracked from a falling rock during the storm's worst moments, and his bioluminescent patterns were dim, flickering with colors that meant pain and fatting strength. 2 of his companions were with him, trying to shield his body from the continuing weather, but they were exhausted and losing hope. Knelt beside him without a moment of hesitation. She examined his injuries with careful fingers, ignoring the burns on her own hands, focusing entirely on what needed to be done. "The crack is serious but not fatal," she said. "We need to stabilize him and get him to shelter. I can make a stretcher from these branches and the emergency fabric we have left." One of his companions stared at her. "You would help him, after everything he did to you, after everything he said." Did not look up from her work. "He's injured, he needs help, that's all that matters right now." She built the stretcher in minutes, her damaged hands moving with practiced efficiency. She organized the carrying rotation, ensuring that was never jostled, that his cracked shell was protected from further damage. She walked beside the stretcher for kilometers, checking his condition, adjusting the carrier's pace, keeping him alive through sheer force of attention and will. Drifted in and out of consciousness. During one of his aware moments, he managed to focus on his face. "Why?" he whispered. The word came out broken, filtered through a translator that was barely functioning. "Why do you help me?" Met his eyes, all 4 of them, strange and alien and filled with confusion. "Because you needed help," she said simply. "That's reason enough." She did not explain further. She did not offer philosophy or justification. She simply continued walking, continued watching, continued keeping alive someone who had made her life miserable for months. By the time they reached the original beacon point, his team had grown to 31 students from 9 different species. She had organized them into an efficient unit, with clear roles and responsibilities, with supply distribution and medical care and shelter construction all running smoothly under her direction. When the rescue ships finally broke through the atmospheric interference and landed nearby, the coordinator who emerged was a senior administrator who had been certain that casualties from this disaster would number in the dozens. Instead, she found 31 students gathered in orderly groups, the injured being treated, the healthy standing watch, and a single human girl sitting quietly at the edge of the gathering with her ruined hands resting in her lap. "You organized all of this?" the coordinator asked. One human student looked up. Her face was pale with exhaustion. Her arms and hands were covered in burns and cuts. She had not slept in over 30 hours. "Everyone helped," she said. "I just suggested directions." The coordinator looked around at the assembled students. Many of them were watching with expressions that transcended species differences. What she saw in those eyes was not fear. It was not suspicion or contempt or any of the emotions that humans usually inspired in other species. It was gratitude. It was admiration. It was something that might, in time, become understanding. "You saved lives today," the coordinator said softly. "Many lives." Shrugged, then winced as the movement pulled at her injuries. "I just did what humans do," she said. "We survive, and we help each other survive. It's the only way we ever made it this far." She closed her eyes and finally allowed herself to rest. Around her, 30 students from across the galaxy kept watch, protecting the girl who had walked into hell to bring them home. 3 days after the rescue, the Galactic Youth Academy held an assembly. The great hall where had first arrived was filled once again with students from every species the Academy served. The same crystalline dome revealed the same endless stars. The same polished floors reflected the same artificial lights, but something fundamental had changed in this space. Something invisible but unmistakable. Entered through the same doors she had used months ago. Her hands were wrapped in regenerative bandages. The burns on her arms were healing but still visible. She walked with the same steady pace she had always used, neither hurrying nor hesitating. And the hall fell silent. It was the same silence that had greeted her on her first day. The same sudden halt of conversation, the same turning of heads, the same focused attention from hundreds of beings. But this silence was different. Could feel the difference in her bones. This was not fear. Approached her first. The young's antennae were held high, in a posture that her cultural studies had taught her indicated pride and formal respect. He stopped before her and performed a bow that she had never seen him use, one that dropped his entire upper body nearly parallel to the floor. "Cole," he said, his voice carrying through the silent hall. "On behalf of the students of this academy, I offer gratitude beyond the capacity of words to express. You saved the lives of our people. You asked nothing in return. We are in your debt." Started to respond, but movement from across the hall caught her attention. Was walking toward her. The leader's shell had been repaired, but faint lines remained where the cracks had been. His bioluminescent patterns pulsed with colors she had learned to associate with deep emotion, with sincerity, with the equivalent of vulnerability. He moved slowly, not from injury but from the weight of what he was about to do. He stopped before her and lowered himself to the ground. The posture was unmistakable. It was the deepest gesture of submission and apology in culture, a position that I adopted only when acknowledging a fundamental error, a moral failure so complete that nothing less could address it. Gasps rippled through the assembled students. Several of the other present looked away, unable to witness their leader in such a position. "I was wrong about you," said. His translator rendered the words flatly, but his patterned colors conveyed the emotion his voice could not. "I believed that were monsters. I believed that your survival instincts made you dangerous to civilized beings. I believed that everything about your species was built for destruction." He looked up at her, all four eyes meeting her too. "I did not understand that the same instincts that help you survive also drive you to protect. I did not understand that your strength exists not to harm, but to shield. I did not understand that humans became what they are not through conquest, but through cooperation, not through destroying threats, but through saving each other from them. He remained in his lowered position. I offer no excuse for my behavior toward you. I offer only this truth. I was wrong, completely and absolutely wrong, and I am grateful beyond measure that you saved my life despite the wrongs I committed against you. Stood silent for a moment. The entire hall waited, breathless, for her response. She extended her bandaged hand, stared at it, his patterns flickering with confusion. Among such a gesture from someone in a superior position to someone in submission was unprecedented. It violated every protocol, every expectation, every cultural norm. "Get up," said quietly. "I didn't help you so you could humiliate yourself in front of everyone. I helped you because you needed help. That's all. We're even now. Actually, we were always even. I never kept score." Slowly, reached up with his upper manipulator and took her hand. She pulled, helping him rise to his full height. His patterns shifted through colors that had no direct translation but spoke of something profound occurring within him. "I would like to understand your species better," he said, "if you would be willing to teach me." "I'd like that," said. "Maybe we can start with why humans shake hands. It's actually a really interesting story. It goes back thousands of years to when humans had to show each other they weren't holding weapons." A sound rippled through the hall. It took a moment to recognize it. Laughter. Actual laughter, or the equivalent sounds from species that did not laugh but expressed amusement in other ways. The tension that had gripped the assembly was breaking, dissolving into something lighter. More students approached, and in crystalline beings and amphibians and dozens of others, all moving toward with questions and gratitude and simple curiosity. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she was surrounded not by empty space, but by beings who wanted to be near her. "Is it true that Earth has water that falls from the sky?" one student asked. "Is it true that humans can run for hours without stopping?" asked another. "Is it true that your species domesticated predators and keeps them in your homes as companions?" Found herself smiling. "Yes, yes, and yes, we call them dogs, they're wonderful, I miss mine terribly." "You miss your predator companion." "She's not really a predator anymore. She mostly just sleeps on the couch and begs for treats, but she's very soft and she always knows when I'm sad." The questions continued. The crowd around her grew. Students who had avoided her for months now pressed close, eager to hear about her world, her species, her experiences. Instructors observed from the edges of the gathering, their expressions reflecting the same shift that had occurred in their students. Later that evening, sat in the dining hall at the table designed for 12. This time, every seat was filled, was teaching her a word game that involved complex patterns of light and sound. A young student was asking about Earth's oceans and whether it was true that humans swam in them for enjoyment. Prism was communicating through carefully modulated light pulses, telling a story about there that the translator rendered as surprisingly funny. Someone had finally programmed the food synthesizer correctly, was eating actual pasta with a sauce that was not quite right but was close enough to bring tears to her eyes. It tasted like home. She thought about the warning she had given in the months ago. She thought about standing in front of and his followers, telling them what she could do if they pushed her too far. The threat had been real. Everything she had said was true. Humans were capable of terrible things when forced to defend themselves. But they were capable of other things too. Her mother had once told her that humanity's greatest achievement was not fire or language or technology. It was the simple act of looking at another being in pain and choosing to help. That instinct, her mother said, was what separated survival from civilization. It was what made humans more than just clever animals scratching out an existence on a hostile world. Had not fully understood that at the time, she understood it now. The galaxy had expected a predator. They had seen her forward-facing eyes and her dense muscles and her species' violent history, and they had assumed they knew what she was. They had braced themselves for a monster. Instead, they found a protector. They found a girl who walked into storms to save strangers, who climbed into ravines with bleeding hands to pull out beings she had never met, who carried the ones who could not walk and treated the ones who were hurt and organized the survivors and kept them alive through sheer stubborn refusal to let anyone die. The Academy Hall had gone silent with fear when she arrived. Now it filled with the sounds of conversation and laughter and the beginnings of friendships that would span species and stars. The silence had transformed into something else entirely. It had transformed into welcome. Cole, 17 years old, the first human to attend the Galactic Youth Academy, had finally found her place among them. Not as a monster to be feared or a curiosity to be studied, but as a friend to be treasured. She was still she would always be nothing could change the world she came from or the instincts bred into her across millions of years of evolution. But those instincts had never been about destruction. They had always been about something else, something that the galaxy was only now beginning to understand. Humans survived because they refused to leave each other behind. That was the secret of that was the truth that had carried with her across the stars. And now, finally, others were beginning to see it too.